All right, guys. So I wanted to make this second video, and I'm going to make a lot of videos in this series. Like I said, the main goal for me is to help you get out of taking meds, ADHD meds, and realizing that this industry is just a massive amount of, it's a grift. It's a massive grift, and and it's not scientific. So before I get into all the strategies that I've done to come off of ADHD meds and to not use therapy anymore and to be healthy in the sense that I don't use these drugs that were terrible. I don't. I am. I have my impulsivity and I'm able to focus impulsivity under control. I'm able to focus on work better. Now again, when I get to those strategies, you'll see it takes work. It's like going to the gym. You some days you'll get better. Some days you'll be better at it. Some days you won't be good at it. But it's normal. My main goal for me here is to make you realize that you are normal. You're not sick, okay? And that this shit that is masquerading as science and doctor is not science. This is by professionals. And my goal with this video is to walk you through the split in the in the scientific world of how psychology and specifically ADHD is not scientific. And the first step of any argument is definitions. We have to establish definitions. So first, this is something that a lot of people don't know. What the fuck is science? Like what makes something scientific? What makes something not scientific? Well, that's being able to refute falsification, right? That's the definition of science, which is I can refute something. Because if I can't refute it, if I can't argue it, right, or I can't falsify it, then what's the point of calling something science, right? Like, because you can't falsify Christianity or Judaism, or you can't falsify a religion, right? You can't disprove it. If someone told you Jesus walked on water or Moses parted the sea, you can't falsify that, right? You can't test it to make predictable, to make any predictions that this actually happened and that it's possible to make that happen. And again, I'm not criticizing. I'm not in the camp of like, because once you'll see the strategies that I tell you to implement, you'll see that I'm not in the camp that's anti-religion. I'm just saying religion is here, science is here. They're both equally important, but they're both separate. What I do hate and what I think is a grift is when people masquerade something that is religious, i.e., psychology, as something that is not religious. It's not. It doesn't have. It's scientific. We know what we're saying. So that's my first step with you. And why is this goal for this is really important for me is because once you realize that this is all a grift and it's not scientific, you will start putting responsibility back in your hands and start taking some of my advice, other people's advice to start working on yourself to be a better and healthier adult. Healthy is the part here. Healthy is the most important part because don't get me wrong, popping that pill, I've done Adderall for almost 10 years, I think 8 years or something like this. So, and I've done, like, I was on about 80 milligrams. And again, I can tell you my story later on, but like I was abusing it and then it got to abuse later on and stuff like that. But the point is that responsibility. My goal is to first make you realize that this is a grift, make you realize it's not scientific, put back responsibility in your hands, okay? And that will hopefully lead for you being a healthier adult that doesn't take amphetamines. Methamphetamine, you're taking amphetamines. And that's my biggest win over here. So let's start first with a few steps over here. So first, replication crisis. Again, I'm not going to bore you here and read every single line over here, but I just want to give you the abstract of every paper here that I put out. And then, of course, you could read it on your own, or you could research it more in depth. But my goal here is to give you the abstract of all these papers. So first, replication crisis. As I said, this is a problem in psychology that came up in about 2010, where a few scientists try to reproduce papers in psychology. Now, what's crazy to me is if you're a Karl Popper fan, and Karl Popper is an absolute genius, he predicted this about 60 years ago, or sorry, wait, 80 years ago or more, um, about psychology, on how he was saying already back then that it's not science. Because you can't argue, you can't refute the stuff that Freud says based on whatever happened with your mother as a kid. You can't refute it. You can't falsify. Like all the theories of Freud are not falsifiable. Therefore, they're not science. Now, people were making fun of people. Back then, it was controversial. They were like, "Hey, a lot of people didn't agree with him," and obviously, psychology became something massive as a field. Um, and and here, lo and behold, in 2010, a lot of scientists, researchers tried to reproduce existing papers in psychology. And if you look at the numbers, I couldn't find this, but like some people break it down by fields. Um, and I'll put it in the comments, but um, it's 60% as a whole, right? They couldn't reproduce 60% of the papers in psychology, right? And in some categories, it was over like 70 or 80% within psychology. That's how terrible it is. They called it a crisis. Like, this is a massive crisis for that industry. It's like, what the fuck? Like, you can't reproduce most of this shit, you know? Um, and that's very scary. Like, and again, it's not a problem if you say psychology is something like, hey, it works for me once, it works for some people, it doesn't work for other people. It's like a fun thing to try. And like, if it's in that category, that's fine. But once you masquerade it as science and as like, hey, these are what the professionals are saying, that's when it becomes harmful. So I'm not against psychology because like I know some, because I know some people that, for example, gain benefit from, there's like a really good therapist that they help them work through problems. That's fine. But to masquerade as science, that's when it gets problematic. So first, let's start with this. I highly recommend you go into the replication crisis. It's a very, very, very big deal, and a lot of people spoke about it. And it was a massive fucking thing that dropped on that industry. Now let's talk about Karl Popper. Maybe most of you know him. I'm not sure if you guys know him or not. This is again I want to go back to definitions. What's false? What's science? Science is being falsifiable. If you can't refute it, it's not science. And I'll quote. According to Karl Popper, he believed that the criterion for the scientific status of a theory is its falsifiability or refutability or testability. A theory or idea shouldn't be scientific unless it could, in principle, be proven false. Real science aims to be disproven and not confirmed. Now, do you see that's the exact opposite of a religion? So when you say whatever you know about ADHD is a fact, like you are a just like any other religious zealot. You like have these ideas and your biases around it, and you put your head in the sand. And I get it. You're happy to take Adderall because, again, you're taking the greatest drug on earth in terms of making you happy, right? It's like, of course you're focusing, of course you're happy, but again, there's always a trade-off. The question is what the trade-off is, and also the question is how many years have you been doing it, and how is it affecting your life? How is it affecting your relationships, and everything else? And also, how does this diagnosis of ADHD is affecting your life and your relationships and everything by you believing in that, right? So we'll get to that. So, anyways, that's the definition. I hope you guys understand. Next. Yeah, this is another quick quote. If we are uncritical, we should always find what we want. We should look for and find confirmation. We should look away from and not see whatever might be dangerous to our pet theories. So this is also important to the theme. I really like this quote. Okay, so now Karl Popper, it's the last quote of Karl Popper, and then I will go into papers. Karl Popper believed that the Freudian psychoanalysis is not scientific because it doesn't make predictions that can be falsified. He argued that these theories are compatible with every possible observation, right? Because you can make pretty much anything work in psychology. You could say, hey, the reason why you have X is because your mother has like left you or didn't like you or whatever. You could come up with basically any theory. And that it's impossible to prove that Freudianism is not true, at least in part. This is because Freudian psychology is a complex framework to explain past behaviors and it makes no significant testable predictions. Again, I highly recommend you guys read any book by Karl Popper. You guys dig into this so you can understand the definition of science, so you can work with a better framework of understanding that. And again, and maybe you guys already know this, so that's no problem. But okay, so now that we passed definition, let's get into some papers about ADHD. I think this one is really great. I mean, yeah, it starts off with Karl Popper as a framework, but it goes deep into how, because ADHD really is like, there is a few things that define ADHD, which is executive functioning theory. There is um, um, what yeah, the state regulation model. So it goes into the difference, like the delay aversion and dual pathway theory. So there's basically, in this paper they go into every theory within ADHD, and it will show you that most of these things are not falsifiable. They're, so for example, this one I really liked um, about the executive functioning theory, which is like basically it's very hard to so here, let me, I wanted to not bore, yeah, okay, so many papers have used executive functioning theories to produce testable hypotheses about the role of the frontal cortices and their circuits and of ADHD. One difficulty, however, with the executive functioning theory is the complexity in defining and then testing an executive function. The behavioral manifestations of ADHD probably presents a combination of cognitive motor processes. For example, response inhibition as measured by the stop signal task and cognition, control the prime motor responses. Ideally, the contribution of these processes will be taken into account when formulating a hypothesis for testing and response inhibition. The potentially poor understanding and contribution of each of these processes may be one explanation for the inconsistency in the results from behavioral and functional imaging studies for some of the executive function studied. So it's not consistent. These things are not, again, reproducible. A lot of these mainstream theories, and some of this stuff is in, yeah, you just can't test them. It's very hard to reproduce. Now, again, I recommend, I'll put this in the comment, I recommend you read this on your own if you're really interested, but that's another point about ADHD. Another one that I think is important to talk about is faking at ADHD. So obviously some of you guys already know this, but a lot of people get misdiagnosed. A lot of people take, like, we all have problems, little problems of memory, forgetting keys, and like, you know, not feeling focused at work, or like, dude, everyone goes through these things in life. Like, you're not special. Like, so the thing is about our society is people want to feel like they're special, or they're like they have a special identity. So they create these identities by saying, oh, my problems are all because of ADHD, or all because of X, or all because of Y. And the truth is, a lot of you guys are misdiagnosed. A lot of you guys are taking meds, you don't need it. A lot of you guys are that think you have ADHD, you don't, and that's a fact. Again, I recommend reading this paper. Not only that, and here in the final research, I like this. I'm just going to highlight this. Um, yeah, in the final research article, we were able to locate college students, divided 80 college students in the following three study groups: controls, fakers, and students with genuine ADHD. One of the most interesting aspects of the study was the clarity in the procedure section of the report regarding the actual training of the faker group. Fakers were given only 5 minutes to read through a brief clinical scenario, pursue internet information, was presented a pseudo web page, and take notes. Following this brief training, all participants took an extensive battery test, 12 in all. Like the previous researchers investigated found the symptoms checklist were particularly susceptible to faking. So, what can we conclude from these fake studies? First, ADHD symptom checklists are easily faked. Second, fairly sophisticated testing materials are required to demonstrate inconsistencies in testing that will indicate the feigning of ADHD symptoms. So, they're very easy to fake. So, and not only that, they're very easy to, in my opinion, also to feel like you have them, right? Like they ask you questions like, "Hey, do you forget your keys or whatever?" Or like, or do you not feel focused at work? Like, yeah, man. Like, how many people feel that way sometimes? Or maybe you just fucking hate your job or something, or maybe it could be so many reasons. So that's again another piece. And lastly, if you really, this is kind of connected to this paper, but um, I recommend read the abstract over here. And I want to be fast over here, but The unreal existence of ADHD, criteria, functioning, and forms of diagnosis entity. The contemporary conceptualization of ADHD as a complex, multi-factorial neurodevelopment disorder cannot be understood as such without a complex assemblage of political, economic, and structural and cultural processes that deem the conceptualization to be valuable and useful. In this article, we use the notion of psychiatrizations as a lens through which to see parts of these processes that make up ADHD, what it is. In the first part of the article, we critically assess the scientific basis of the ADHD diagnosis via examining its diagnostic criteria, and presented as a current fifth edition of Diagnostic and Statistical Manual Mental Disorder, DSM. It's like the Bible of modern psychiatry. The second part of the article asks what is done with the ADHD diagnosis entity and with the idea that it represents a natural neurodevelopment state within an individual, something an individual has as a represented in the DSM-5. Again, I think that's like the Bible of how do you diagnose these conditions. Drawn from our previous research, we analyze that how ADHD becomes real in discourse practices as a powerful semiotic mediator through analysis of the various functioning forms in which it takes shape in social, and individual. We conclude that the frequent changes in diagnosis and criteria do not reflect any real scientific progress. Among other reasons, they change to match better the maneuvers of individual when navigating an increasingly psychiatrized society in the search for recognition, support, category membership, immunity, sympathy, and a sense of belonging. And this is the point that I was saying. A lot of people, this is so important to understand when it comes to ADHD. Like, there's a lot of that going on. Now, again, I'm not going to deny some people have problems focusing. Some people have problems. These problems that you're saying you have are probably true, right? But you're also, if you were overweight, you also have different problems, right? Like that arise from that. The answer is not Ozempic like people are doing, is to go to the gym. And what I'm trying to sell here is not any drugs or anything, is to first tell you that whatever it is that you're believing it is science is not. And take, once you remove and you pop that bottle, because once I popped that bubble for myself, it helped me say, okay, now the responsibility is in my hands. Now it's time to go to the gym in that sense, right? It's time to do the work, right? And I was lucky. I fell on a few things. I met a few people that had the same problem as me, and they got over it. And I and they stopped doing meds. And I asked them. And again, again, those are videos for next time. I'll continue this series. I hope I did a decent job at explaining this problem, and I hope I can be the first step in helping you burst that bubble so that you don't do meth, essentially. Love you all. Again, this is a message of love. It's to help you become healthy, and I'll explain more in the next videos.